I'm Dan Anderson. I'm going to talk about crypto and breaking crypto with random number generators. Background, I've been working on crypto and security for about 10, 15 years at Sun Microsystems and later Oracle. Most recently, the whole project was kind of canceled, Solaris and everything, and they're now just in maintenance mode. And that one advantage is that freed up a lot of time for me to work on this presentation. So what did I do? I started fixing up everything around the house, painting, gardening, drainage, everything but the presentation. But it's good because I got everything else I needed done. I also implemented verified boot on Solaris, which verifies kernel modules using RSA signatures. I'm going to post this presentation on Twitter, and that's my Twitter handle at the bottom. So, a common attitude I have, or I see, is that crypto is broken, and there's nothing that we could do about it. And that's something I see from my technical coworkers who don't work in security, but they have that attitude that all crypto has backdoors, and it's just, that's the way it is. But the truth is that crypto is not broken. The math is solid. Over time, you usually have to have longer keys, and some algorithms, especially the early ones like MD5, SHA-1, they have been broken, but the current crypto is still working. There's an exception, of course, quantum math, and that I'll talk about a little later. But the important point is it's not necessary to break crypto. There's a lot of easier methods around. If you want to pick the hardest method, you would try to break the math, but that's a waste of time. Let's talk about some other methods. There's social engineering, physical threats, blackmail. You could actually take the device. Phishing is probably the best way to do it because it's very easily automated and you could attack the whole world. There's also side channel leaks. That's where you could listen to the radio waves or listen or look for the timing in the responses to try to get information. There's also large databases available for passwords and hashing. And finally, there's poor implementation of crypto. And what I'm going to talk about is this one little facet, bad random number generators. So all the other stuff you could see in other talks. One problem is crypto is confusing, especially public and private keys. You have two keys, and that's very confusing to people. If you want to do crypto and send something that's encrypted, what do? Do you send them the public key or the private key? Maybe you should be safe and send them both. I don't know. That's what Adobe has their security incident response team. They're security gurus. So what do? They posted their public key and private key on the web. And that happened last month. They took it down, but it's easily, you could see how even the experts could make mistakes. And of course, one thing you should not do is store your private and public key in the same file. It's not a good idea. Let's start from the beginnings. Random number generators, I don't know when they started, but dice have been found from the 24th century BCE, so that's probably the earliest generator. In the 1950s, Rand Corporation wrote this book, A Million Random Digits, and it was recently republished in 2001. And it created that book by using an electronic roulette wheel, and the output was punched into several IBM cards, and they published the book from that. If you want to see a lot of funny reviews, you could look at the go to Amazon.com and look at the book reviews for that. Like somebody complained that the page numbers had not been randomized. Pseudo-random number generators were invented by John von Neumann, he invented the concepts of the modern digital computer in the 1950s. The problem was that with his random number generators, it repeated very frequently. And that's what all pseudo-random number generators do, is they repeat. So the idea is to make them not repeat for n bits or n digits, but you just have to be aware of that problem. And true random number generators follow then, and they usually take the input from nature, like using heat sensors or something else like that. And finally, after that, there's crypto-secure pseudo-random number generators, and they have been analyzed by experts, and they have to have these properties like not repeating after n bits. Randomness. There's several ways to tell if randomness is good, and the first sanity test, which is not enough by itself, is just to create a scatter-gather chart. I just got some random numbers and converted them to comma-separated variables and imported them into my OpenOffice spreadsheet. And you could do that with Excel too. Now, random numbers, when you do this, you're not supposed to see any geometric patterns in there. And if you looked at early random number generators, especially from 10, 20 years ago, you would see lines in the chart. It also is not supposed to be perfect. For example, we see that hole there, which is okay. If it's perfectly distributed, that would mean you could be able to predict some of the random numbers generated towards the end. So, NIST, which is the U.S. government standards organization, they have a test suite where you could take your random numbers and see if they're valid, at least according to them. And you can also use just statistical analysis on it. The best bet is you actually analyze the code or actually analyze the algorithm to see if it's valid. And that's usually best done with a public discussion and not in some private secret group or something. Okay, I'm going to talk about 3 different RSAs, and this is a confusion, but there's three of them. There's RSA the algorithm, RSA the conference, RSA the company. RSA the algorithm, that was invented in 1978. It was actually invented in 1973 by the British, but it's kept secret. It was a top secret algorithm. And so these people in the US invented it 5 years later. They didn't know about the earlier invention because it was a secret. But RSA is a public-private crypto algorithm. So you have a private key and a public key. You encrypt with the private key and you give it to somebody else and they could decrypt it, or anybody else could decrypt it with a public key. It's very robust. It's been around forever. The main flaw with RSA is humans. They leak keys and they don't store keys properly. I've worked in hardware a lot in operating systems, and one thing I've found with a lot of computer manufacturers is they have BIOSes, for booting and everything, and they sign their BIOS, but they don't care about the private key. They just keep it on their hard drive or the home directory. So you could probably, for any BIOS manufacturer, eventually snoop around and find their private keys. They don't store it very well. You're supposed to store it in a physical safe or in a HSM, which is a secure way of storing keys, secure hardware. And also, as I mentioned before, it's a hard concept to grasp, especially for the public. RSA is also not quantum safe. So supposedly it will work for the next, say, 20 years or so, but after that it probably won't work. It's best in the meantime to use long RSA keys, 2048 or 3042. You could try 4096, but that's kind of, very slow. Okay, now we talk about RSA, the conference. That's in San Francisco. And it's kind of tainted a little bit. The emphasis is on comedian and actor keynotes. I like comedians and actors too, but I don't go to a conference for technical content. I could see them on TV. Fortunately, they got rid of the booth babes or whatever, so I'm more professional, but still, there's a lot of sales hype too. So they kind of emphasize more buying somebody's device that will solve all your problems as opposed to technical content. They still have technical content, but it seems like it's overshadowed by this other stuff. RSA Security, the company, they were formed after RSA was created. They started with RSA, the algorithm, and sold that. And RSA was later bought by ECC, and now it's owned by Dell Corporation. They have this product called BSafe, which is their secure crypto library. It had an algorithm called dual ECD Drbg, but unfortunately, the NSA paid them $10 million to put it in there. And the NSA also created the algorithm. They went to ANSI, which is kind of a closed source standards organization, and had a standard approved. Then they had NIST approve that standard, but all the people who created the standard were from the NSA, so it's very suspicious. And that code, that backdoor code, or backdoor random number generator, was in there for almost 9 years, till 2013. Okay, let's talk about breaking crypto. You start with brute force. So brute force is just trying every possibility there is, one at a time. And that just gives you an existence proof that you could break it. But it's not very practical. You want a solution that will, you want to have a solution before the sun turns into a red giant 5 billion years from now. So you try to chip away from the possibilities. And one way of chipping away is the key in generating keys is using random numbers. You take random numbers and try each one and see if they work, see if they're a prime number and everything. And if your random number input is predictable, your keys are predictable. So that's, and in fact, in 2012, somebody tried to harvest all the SSL keys on the web that they could find. And they found that almost 0.5% of all the keys were duplicates. That kind of implies there's a lot of sharing, or that a lot of the key generation is no good because they use flawed random number generators. So let's talk about random number generation. Entropy is a term that people use in crypto to talk about the input for random numbers. And that's just taking numbers from nature or any other source you could find and mix them together to a random pool. But the problem is if you get input, if you're garbage in, garbage out, if your input, your entropy is bad, your random numbers will be bad. And much software has had poor entropy at one time or another. I don't want to go over each problem, but here's where common problems are found. Using session IDs or process IDs, those are usually very low numbers when you first boot a system, mostly zeros. Same with the clock, that sometimes starts at 0 or at a fixed date, like 1980, 1970, whatever, 2000. Clock resolution, if you use that's could be fine if you have a high resolution clock, but your clock is rarely down to 1 nanosecond, and some clocks only go down to 1 second. So your high resolution clock is mostly zeros and 1 bit on or something. Also sometimes used as random input disk seek times, your keyboard, your mouse, and that's all good for desktops. It doesn't work for servers, it doesn't work for embedded devices. Internet of Things, because it doesn't have any peripherals. So that's all missing. Temperature sensor is another source. Of course, when you first boot a system, it's a kind of a known temperature. It's pretty cold. So that's kind of predictable. So you don't want to use, a lot of this stuff is just bad for your entropy. Rolling your own number generator is kind of bad and risky. Let's talk about Debian Linux. They broke their random number generator in 2006. Somebody on a Debian team ran the static source analyzer, and that does a lot of good things, like looking for corrupt pointers or uninitialized data or duplicate code. Well, this analyzer flagged some duplicate code, so the guy just deleted the duplicate code, except in this case, that code was really needed, and it created a bug. And that was not discovered until several years later. I didn't put down the date there. The OpenBSD project got tired of problems not only with Debian Linux, but all the other operating system manufacturers who have poor random number generators. So they had an idea, we'll just invent our own. But just inventing your own doesn't mean it's good. They created this algorithm or function, arc4random, in 2008. It's based on the arc4 crypto algorithm, which is originally a secret algorithm invented by RSA Labs in 1987, and it was reverse engineered by somebody a few years later looking at the object. But it really is a poor crypto algorithm. It's not used anymore. It's a very fast algorithm, but it has problems. As in key attacks, there are several ways to attack RC4 that have been discovered from 2001 to 2015. You could look them all up on its wiki page. Also, RC4 is a crypto algorithm. It was never intended as a random number generator, and the output is not uniform. If you take that output and put on that scatter-gather chart, you'll see a lot of dark and white spots on your graph. Non-uniform is bad because that means it's kind of easier to predict your random numbers, and when you can predict it, it's easier to break crypto when it depends on your random numbers. OpenBSD replaced RC4 with another algorithm, crypto algorithm called SHA-SHA-20 a couple of years ago, and it seems to work better, but that's just a lesson that it's dangerous to invent your own, not only invent your own crypto, but invent your own random number generator. Now, there's still old code out there that uses the old version of RC4. Estimating entropy. Entropy is not all alike, so you want to try to figure out how much entropy is in your input. Where you generate random numbers simplifies, you mix all your entropy together, you do some stuff, and you have a random number pool. And mixing is often performed by XOR, and you extract entropy using some crypto algorithms, or like HMAC or CBCMAC. But you need to estimate your entropy. Let's take a simple example of passwords. Let's assume your passwords are always lowercase, and often they are unless there's a restriction. There's only 26 characters to choose from. So you could estimate the entropy, square root of 26, that's around 5 bits. So you don't get your full 8 bits of entropy in a byte. You only get 5 out of the 8. So and you could do that with any other entropy source. You try to estimate how much randomness there actually is in there. So let's talk about dual EC Drbg, which I mentioned again. It's a deterministic random bit generator, ECC based. As I said before, is based on the X9.82 standard. ANSI, again, is a closed standard, so it was just done by this closed working group that consisted completely of NSA people and was approved by ANSI. The NIST, the U.S. Government Standards Board, just adopted the standard unchanged. So the P and Q values, which are used in initialization, are hard-coded in the standard. And that's a problem because they put a backdoor when you use those P and Q standards. It made them easier to know what random numbers were generated. As far as we were concerned in Solaris, we did not implement it in our operating system because it was just so slow. They had about 5 different options for bit generators, and we just didn't implement that one. And there's other ones out there that have been out there for years and are tried and true. In OpenSSL, they did implement it because somebody paid them some money, and of course OpenSSL is open source, and they're desperate for money and stuff. They only have a couple developers. So they were paid to implement all the bit generation algorithms in the standard. But fortunately, there was a bug. Rarely do you say, fortunately there's a bug in there, but because there's that bug, the random number generator did not work, and so the backdoor did not work. So, and later when it was found, instead of fixing the bug, it was a one-line bug, they just deleted all the code. The algorithm itself has been suspected since 2007. Microsoft Research, you could look it up, and they had some doubts about that algorithm. And okay, as far as implementing the algorithm, if you want to implement the algorithm or use it, you should choose your own P and Q, but nobody did. And in fact, that's true in general. You try to, if you have an option to choose your initial IV, your initial vectors or initial numbers, you should do that over a number recommended in the standard, especially if that standard does not tell you how to derive it. Okay, this is kind of repeat duplicate slides here. Okay, as I said, $10 million. RSA denies that they knew anything about this, but they did gladly take $10 million from the NSA, and they did make it the default algorithm, even though it's slow and unproven. They made it the default, so it's very suspicious to me. So. Breaking crypto with random numbers. I'm running out of time here. Magic numbers refer to mysterious numbers. You don't know where they come from, and they're used in crypto algorithms. Beware of magic numbers. If you find one in a standard, ask where that magic number come from. For example, in SHA-256, it uses as magic numbers the first 32 bits of the fractional part of square roots of the first 8 prime numbers. That's hard to fake, so that sounds pretty good. And you see similar stuff in other legitimate crypto algorithms that tell you how they came up with those random numbers. Okay, Intel RD-RAN, that's their random number instruction. Intel self-certified that their new random instruction meets all these standards, the NIST SP 800. Well, that's fine, but self-certification does not mean anything. I could self-certify that my dog here also meets the standard, but you need a third party to actually say that this meets a standard. Intel also contributed the changes so we could use it in Solaris, but later on when we found out about this mischief, we kind of changed it to use it as entropy input so that you do some later processing to mix everything up. And that's the approach that Linux did from the beginning, and FreeBSD also changed their code to mix up the input of RD-RAN and not use the input directly, and that seems to be good enough. There's a suspicion, about RD-RAN, Intel's RD-RAN, that NSA, did they introduce a backdoor into it? The Snowden papers revealed that the NSA and a GCHQ, that's a British equivalent, broke an unnamed chipset that was in the design stage. There's 4 microprocessors I know that have random numbers in it. Intel, AMD, VIA, SPARC. Now, if you could rule out time travel, that takes out 2 of the candidates. SPARC was 2006, and AMD was after the fact, 2015. So we have 2 more. VIA, Okay, that was designed and created in the Czech Republic. Intel was designed and created in the United States. Now, if I was a USA spy organization, who would be more easier to subvert? Somebody in the Czech Republic or the United States? So, but Intel, I think, denies it. And there's no smoking gun, so you got to decide for yourself. Also, Intel later implemented a RDC instruction, which is used for seeding random numbers, which is supposed to be better. Nonces. Nonce means once, a number that you use once. And it really means that. It doesn't mean use it twice, 3 times, 4 times. It means once. It doesn't have to be a random number. It could be a sequential number, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but you better never ever use 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 again, even after rebooting, even among several systems. The easiest way to generate a nonce is with a random number, especially one that's real long, because like even a 32-bit random number that's 2 to the 32nd, you won't repeat that ever unless your random number generator is bad. But being random is not sufficient. It can't be a constant random number. So you can't put the nonce value in your code and expect it to work. As exercise to the user, you could go to GitHub or any other your favorite source repositories and look for nonce and see if you could find where they hard code it. I found it once in a code review. I haven't searched GitHub, but it's a common mistake. A nonce can't also be easily guessed, so you just can't take time of day or your process ID. There's a recent flaw found in WPA2, your Wi-Fi crypto, called crack, and that replays your nonce on error conditions, and that's not okay. Even in error conditions, you can't reuse your nonce. So, TPM, that's a security chip. Trusted platform module that does crypto and lots of other things. I call it the Swiss Army knife of crypto. There's some problems with it. What if just one manufacturer gets something wrong that could cause a lot of damage, or what if one manufacturer is subverted by some government organization? You're just trusting a black box there. How do you break a TPM? It's side channel attacks. It has a very slow bus, LPC, low pin count bus, only runs at 33 megahertz. That means it's easy to probe. You could actually probe it directly. There's only 4 data pins out there, or you could try to monitor for radio waves or power frequency or something. The LPC also has no checksum, so it's just data going out there in the clear. There's also, yes? Okay, I'll speed it up. There's also virtual TPMs, which could be subverted more easily because it's software. The current Infineon chip has a flaw in it from RSA key generation, but that's just not from random number generators, but that's just from using a low exponent. So the TPM is a pro forma checkbox security that's there just because they have to have it. So that's the end of my talk. I'm going to post this on my Twitter feed probably in a couple of days at Dan Anderson. Thank you, everyone.